Do probiotics actually work? And who should take them? Does the gut microbiome have anything to do with longevity? And specifically, should we be looking at the microbiome of supercentenarians to inform us as to what we're doing today? Hey,
Mhm.
everybody, this is me, Dustin Strong, and Dr. V. And we take our time every week to sit down and try to become better people and hopefully help you become better, smarter people as well. We find what's
Right.
new and what people are asking us questions about and try to apply all of our research, our experience, our network of healthcare practitioners to bring the best answers and also bring our clinical experience to say whether or not this is something that you should waste your time on or invest your time in.
Mhm.
And today's a huge topic, right? We're talking about something called Akkermansia. Akkermansia is a strain that has been shown to be present in the microbiomes of supercentenarians, people living well beyond 100 years. And so we're going to answer these few questions here today, hopefully over the course of this. What is it? Why is it important? Should you take it? And how should you take it? And what happens next? So, Dr.
Right.
V, what do you think of Akkermansia so far?
Well, I mean, start off talking about supercentenarians, right? I mean, if the supercentenarians living in a hospital bed for 20 years, what good is that, right? But really, these
Right.
people that you're talking about are still functional, into well over 100. And so,
Mm.
I mean, if I'm going to live past 100, I still want to be riding my bike. I still want to be loving on my kids, grandkids, probably by that time, great grandkids, all that. I want to be functional. And so, yeah, so looking at what these people that are still viable and functional at that age, it's like the people that in the Hunza Valley that still work in the field and do, life and then just don't wake up one day at, 110. That's
Right.
that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Right? And so,
130,
yeah.
140. Yeah, that's where I'm.
Right, right.
I've got a friend who's trying to break, he says, crack the Methuselah code.
Oh
He's like,
yeah.
hey, Methuselah made it to 969. Why can't I? Right?
Now we're going to talk biblical, huh?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Noah did it. Noah was 600 and something, right?
There you go, right?
Mm.
Well, then there's the other way you can look at it. If it takes me 900 years to learn the lessons on this planet that I'm supposed to learn, maybe I'm a slow learner. I don't know.
Maybe that's what supercentenarians are doing. They're
Right.
slow learners.
No disrespect to all of you super,
Right.
because you're all
So,
watching. I know you're all
that's
watching this
right,
right
that they're all here. So yeah, we want to study what these people are doing, right? To
now.
know, that Oprah, people like these are going to always interview these people and what choices did you make, that sort of stuff. So looking at their gut biome tells us about their diet, tells us about what they've done. So you know, my niche, we'll go ahead and start off with, what physically does it look like if the gut biome is not functioning properly? And then we can, dive into some of the individual probiotics and good and bad strains in Akkermansia. So if the gut biome is out of whack, medical terms, if it's out of whack,
Mm.
when the gut is not functioning properly, the quadratus lumborum muscle, the muscle that attaches from the pelvic, uh, the rim of the pelvis to the bottom 12th rib, that muscle will go into spasm when the colon's not functioning. So most low back pain is a colon problem,
Wow.
right? And so the other muscle that gets weak with that is the IT band on the muscle on the
Right.
outside of the leg.
Right over your
So
right shoulder there. It's all in the gray there, right? Along the
right,
sides.
and
Yeah.
that's it, the colon section on the chart. And then, anyway, they can't read the chart in the poster, so we'll
Little
have to
cheat sheet.
verbalize it. So the IT band on the outside of the leg, so runners and cyclists, when you have pain on the outside of the leg, that is a colon issue. And so that, people are trying to adjust their bike fit. And yes, if the seat's too high on the bike, that's going to cause some lateral strain on the knee and exaggerate that. But ultimately, it's pain on the outside of the leg is your colon trying to get your attention.
Mm.
Thumb pain, that's large intestine 4. It's massively common acupuncture point on the thumb. When the thumb, when the thumb hurts, the colon, in fact, that side of the colon, if it's right thumb, the right side of the colon, the ascending side of the colon, or left thumb, descending side of the colon, is going to be tender. When that's compromised, that's typically telling us that you're opening the door for arthritis, because
Mm.
that has to do with that leaky gut, with the gut inflammation And so if you continue to ignore it and take your anti-inflammatories, or the typical medical approach to try to handle that, you're opening the door for worse and worse inflammation and arthritis. So those are some physical aspects. If it's yeast overgrowth or leaky gut, like we're about to talk about, that causes a weakness of the vastus lateralis, the muscle on the outside of the leg, and that's going to cause patellar tracking or knee tracking problems. And that means leaky gut. That means for sure inflammation and that brain fog and things are getting through the intestinal lining. This is going to set up autoimmune conditions. So that lateral knee weakness, I discovered that with a gal that was scheduled for knee replacement, and we couldn't get rid of this pain just above the kneecap on the outside. And it turned out she was getting ready for knee replacement, so she was pounding anti-inflammatories for her knee pain every day and just perpetuating the cycle. Round and round she'd go. She'd create this leaky gut and exaggerate the knee pain, trying to block the pain from the knee, and
Wow.
eventually had the knee replacement. So that's where where this stuff can go when people just kind of put on the headphones, put on the eye mask, and pretend like it doesn't exist with the typical, unfortunately, allopathic approach.
Let's just back
Right?
up just for a second and talk about what leaky gut is, right? So leaky in your gut, just for those of you maybe who are lost there, is in your gut, you're supposed to have the ability to get all the nutrients and the benefit from everything you're eating to get into the bloodstream, right? To deliver it
Right.
where your body needs to heal it. And my theory of aging and anti-aging is just making sure your body has all of the nutrients that it needs to effectively and healthfully replace all the cells. But if you
Right.
can't get that nutrition into the blood to get there to do it, you're going to age rapidly. You're going to
Right.
prematurely start aging. And when it's leaky, that means that there has been damage in there. And it usually has to do with something like there's so many things that could be causing that. But you're
Yeast.
definitely right. You're destroying
Mhm.
your body's ability to effectively heal itself, right? Because you're not bringing in the supplies. Uh,
Right.
okay.
And
And
so
so,
then, viruses or too large of proteins get through that gut, and that is the
autoimmunity,
stage for all the autoimmune problems,
allergies,
Hashimoto's,
right?
MS. I was
Yep.
just reading a paper this morning correlating Epstein-Barr virus with MS.
Hmm.
And again, through this whole leaky gut mechanism, Carrie Bone has just written some work on that.
Okay.
So, I mean, on and on and on. We could go all, it's in the
Right.
truth or trend next time.
Well, and of course, it's a complicated way. It's not an easy fix. You can't just take one thing and all of a sudden, boom, right? It's all
Right,
fixed,
right.
healed. There's a lot of things you can do. And the question we're trying to answer today is Akkermansia part of that equation,
Hmm.
really, right?
Right, right, right.
And of course, this is one thing that we can't say definitively have an absolute truth on it, but we can look at the evidence of what we found. And I'm going to encourage everybody to think more about adding in Akkermansia because it does
Yeah.
help, right? Bring that healing
Well,
in, and which
letting the
makes
truth or
sense.
trend answer out already, huh?
Well, I'm going to start that way, right? But I want to give you my rationale. We're going to do the rationale, right? Okay,
There you
here's the
go.
answer, but here's why that's the answer, I think,
Right,
overall.
right.
And I would say, and I want to hear more about these symptoms, right? Because I think there's a yeast spot that's
There
tender
is.
as
And the
well, right?
bicipital tendonitis.
Right, which would be a sign that there's an imbalance in there. And why would
Hmm.
people be having these imbalances? Well, we're exposed to mold in buildings all the time.
Right.
That's going to compromise it. We're exposed to antibiotics all over the place, pesticides, fungicides. Just saw a guy walk by my door spraying chemicals out there. All of those can kill the good guys, right? And give us an
Right.
imbalance there and start creating this damage. But we have the
Hmm.
opportunity to heal it. That's the good news. And we
Right.
need to learn more about how we can do that.
Mhm. Right, right.
I always like to tell people before you run out and grab a probiotic, before you start dumping in all these life forms, I think Mark Anderson put it really well. If you don't change the environment down there so that they can
Hmm.
thrive, you're throwing away
Hmm.
your money, right? So to
Right,
answer that
right.
question, yeah, don't take a probiotic until
Hmm.
you've addressed and changed the environment in which that probiotic can live and thrive, right?
Right.
What are some of the things?
Soil.
Go
Mm.
ahead.
Soil. It's
Right.
terrain theory, right? That,
Right.
if, like you said, if you're eating sugar and taking Akkermansia, you're just supporting another business. And and then you can end up then supporting big pharma because you can have bigger problems down the road, right?
Right.
So the terrain, you can't grow a garden on cement,
Right.
right? So you want to have healthy soil, which means good, healthy, good minerals in there, good nutrients.
Yeah.
Minerals come from organic vegetables have more minerals because the soil is more vital with minerals because the minerals come through the soil into the plant. Then we eat those. And that's, as I was studying this Akkermansia, I mean, one of the questions that comes up on, as we're Googling it, right, is yeah, how do you grow more, right? Or how do you
Mhm.
facilitate its benefit? And that is eating vegetables, starving it from don't eat the standard American SAD diet.
Right. Right.
The sugars that just feed the yeast that causes bicipital tendonitis and neck tension and brain fog and,
Right.
you know, weakened immune system.
I think what you're, yeah, the diversity of fiber is a piece that I think specifically we can tell people to focus on. I remember learning years ago that the people in the world with the most robust immune systems and the most diverse microbiome, their diets had the most diverse intake of fibers. And what I mean by diverse is if you get into a food rut, you're going to be limiting how diverse your microbiome is. So you got to keep trying
Right,
different foods, blackberries,
right,
blueberries, raspberries. Don't just stick to one, right? Do all of those
right,
with
right.
fibers in there because that's how you maintain. It's probably one of the most important things. What you're
Hmm,
saying
hmm.
is the differentiation between the sad diet and what we really need to do to keep that healthy.
Right.
Sure.
And realistically, I think as the research continues to trend, I mean, part of what I do, I like to kind of as I start having fun and clinically is okay, they need this probiotic, and then I try to muscle test and figure out what food's going to feed that probiotic.
Oh,
You
cool.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and when
So,
specifically pomegranate seeds have
there you
been
go.
highlighted for Akkermansia. And that's interesting.
Okay.
So this last weekend, when I was teaching the seminar, one of the doctors who knew about this actually brought that up, and he mentioned, he goes, "It's really hard," he was saying, "to be able to get an established colony of Akkermansia in those who don't." He said, "But you definitely want to make sure you're feeding them pomegranate." So I want to see
There
if
you
you can
go.
testing for that, and so we can confirm that. Yeah,
Yeah, and pomegranate's highly beneficial for the O blood type,
yeah,
and several others. So yeah, I mean, the more we look at this stuff, right, the more it just becomes cyclical reasoning, and as kind of like what you were talking about, they're having some of the clinicians or excuse me, researchers having trouble growing some of the strains, and they're realizing that the strains are codependent, right?
Mhm.
That
Yes,
sometimes they need a little bit more of the Saccharomyces to grow the strain. It's not just giving a sugar medium to grow the strain in,
right.
or agar. These guys are this community. Like we all need to be in community.
Well, and this
you
is
know.
how I would describe it to people. Look, if firemen are very important. You got to have firemen, right? You cannot have a
Right.
city without firemen. But if the 50% of the population of a city were all firemen, that
Yeah.
community is going to fail, right? Because you don't have other people to help support. You have to have all of the different jobs taken care of in a community
Mm,
for it to be a thriving environment. If everybody was a teacher in a town, the town, as much as teachers are perfectly amazing and needed in the world, the town would
right.
fail, right? So you have to have every different person in a community to be able to do that. Got to have garbage men. You got to have doctors, right? So our microbiome is that to the 10th degree, right? There's so much
Right.
that we don't even know the jobs that are being done down there for us. If we don't
Right.
have these different guys there, we're accelerating our aging because we're not getting the job done that needs to be done.
Nicely put. And getting the job done, these microbiome create the B vitamins that help
Yeah.
facilitate other aspects. They have all these. They're workers. They're actually workers.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
a great way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Hmm,
that was one of the greatest discoveries we made recently talking about El, right? There's so many things
hmm,
that they make for us that
hmm.
we can't make.
Right.
Or methionine, for goodness sake, that something
Hmm.
has been told we can only get it from an external source. Well, unless we have the bugs in us to help us make it, which is really
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
while we're on this
Diversity.
topic, before we go too much further, I want to mention another trend that we should probably address in this because it's a zero fiber diet, and that's carnivore, right? You get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people saying, well, carnivore is the answer to life, right? Everybody, we should only eat these things for the rest of life. And my hesitation in embracing that philosophy, despite people showing great results over time, is exactly that piece, that fiber piece. And I'm
Hmm.
very curious about how that affects the microbiome.
Right. Becomes a
Yeah.
monobiome.
What's that? A
Becomes a
monobiome, right? Now,
monobiome.
this is purely speculation, all right,
Can't
on
quite see
my
what it
half.
says.
This is
What
the
does it?
mug. This was our very first trolls comment. It said, "This is mostly claptrap, speculation, and general nonsense." So I have to deliver that every time. A little bit of speculation, a little bit of claptrap, and a little bit of nonsense.
All
Okay.
right.
So my speculation is what I think about, like how Native Americans lived, right? There were
Hmm.
seasons in life, and this is the planet we
Hmm.
live on. It does these things. We're intended to go through seasons. There may have been a season in the winter where their fiber intake became very low, right? Where they were very close to a carnivore diet, which starves off a lot of yeasts and opportunistic pathogens. So it, in a
Hmm.
sense, is a way of doing a cleansing. But then
Hmm.
when the spring came again, they would start eating all these different fibers. And throughout
Okay.
that time, they would re-inoculate, they'd refill it, and then rinse and repeat. So I think
Hmm.
that there is some wisdom in doing that for a period of time, as long as you don't say, this is the answer for the rest of my 110 years to do it this way,
Yeah.
right? I don't
Yeah.
think you can get there if you don't maintain that cycle in your life. Speculation.
Hey, great point though. And it makes sense historically before, we were living in buildings and
Yeah,
cities,
right,
industrialized, right? We had to live, we had seasons.
right,
And
right.
unless you're in Southern California where it's always one season.
Yeah, that's right. Which messed me up when I lived down there. I was like, wait a minute. The only reason I know it's fall is because football's on. It's weird.
Right.
So I think if we want to answer this question for everybody, do probiotics actually work and who should take them? The answer is yes, they work, right? They are working for us, but
Mhm.
we have to get the right ones in there in the right balance. And we have to, more importantly, support the environment that we're putting them into. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. That's the
Right,
terrain theory,
right,
which as opposed to killing bugs, or,
right,
killing the virus, killing the bacteria. Why did they flourish in the first place? What was the weakness? What wasn't being nourished? And there's, the good minerals, the fiber to feed the good bugs,
yeah,
that can do us service as opposed to do us harm, right? If we
right,
feed the bad bugs, eating the sad American diet, then that feeds the bad bugs and we end up in trouble. If we're feeding too much sugar, that's going to create yeast overgrowth. That's going to cause a leaky gut. That's going to cause, diarrhea. That's an imbalance of too many uh, imbalance of omega oils. We talked about that on the last Truth or Trend. The other symptom when yeast overgrowth, when the bad bugs are growing, is neck tension. I mean, I
mm.
I can get this if I eat a protein bar or something that has a sweetener that doesn't work for me. By the time I'm done, I feel like I need an adjustment. And the,
Wow.
the neck extensors turn off. And the mechanism there is kind of like the same mechanism that cause that anterior shoulder pain, the bicipital tendonitis. Yeast overgrowth causes the valve, either the ileocecal valve or the valve Houston to open up, causes that sacroiliac joint to be compromised. And that weakness is what sets up referred pain. The open valve sets up referred pain to the front of the shoulder, cause the neck extensor muscles to turn off. And so that, person that feels like they need, it's great for chiropractic business, they feel like they need an adjustment every other week or every other day, and it's
Mhm.
as soon as they eat the carbohydrate, boom, you're going to feel it. So that's an
Wow.
almost immediate response to help, the listener understand that, when they eat something that's adversely feeding their microbiome, it's going to be like, ooh, that didn't work.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But and because it's so common, and there's so many people eating things that are feeding the yeast, and there's so much yeast that's overgrowing. In my pre-visit, when people come to my clinic, I, for a period of time, and actually maybe we still do, we give them immediately Spanish black radish, just to
Hmm.
help kind of clear out some of that excess yeast. And like the ileocecal valve getting stuck, that's a big piece for that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I'm okay with that because it's a whole food, right? And it's not
Right.
causing harm, but it can potentially be clearing out a nonsense. What are some other things that you find that are essential for getting rid of the yeast? when you're testing people,
starving it, and
like a
figuring
carnivore
out,
diet.
right. Yeah. Ultimately figure out what's feeding it, get the good probiotics going, get rid of the bad. Often when that has happened, we need to kill it off.
Mm,
Incidentally, estrogen is I call it yeastogenic.
mm,
Estrogen is very acidifying. So the gal that's part of why carb cravings for gals, right?
right.
With the estrogen surge, that's kind of part of that whole emotionality and the food cravings that come along with that estrogen surge. In other words, during ovulation and so on. So that goes on. um, and keeping those healthy is going to allow us to flourish ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we've answered the probiotics actually work, who should take them.
Yeah.
The next question
Um,
that we should tackle possibly is what foods support a healthy microbiome, right? What
yeah.
what are the foods? And you mentioned a lot of different fibers, and that
Mhm.
you were mentioning how it's really cool specifically to find what foods are specifically supporting certain things.
Right.
But I'm going to open it up just and then let you run wild, hog wild with it.
Mhm.
When I talk to people about this, I remind them that almost everybody's heard of Lactobacillus acidophilus,
Mhm.
meaning
Mhm.
it's an acid loving thing. Most people have this concept of, they've read this book, Alkalize or Die, and they think they need to alkalize
Mhm.
their whole body, right? Until they're just a
Mhm.
pile of lye on the floor. But
Mhm.
you have to have a pH in the colon that's pretty acidic, actually, about 6.8, really, right? Because
Mhm.
7 is neutral, that's where water is. And my favorite food to help achieve that is sauerkraut, right? Sauerkraut is
Mhm.
something that I encourage people to do all the time. In fact, almost every day, I do at least a forkful of sauerkraut when I'm here in the office, when I'm breaking
Okay.
fast in the day.
Mhm. Mhm.
And of course, there's other added benefits to that for sure. But what other foods do you think that anybody who's watching this and they're wondering how can they increase the strength and the vitality of their microbiome? What would you suggest?
Yeah. Yeah, fermented foods, as you talked about,
Yep.
that's where we can get the bugs, and we need to eat the nutritional medium to go with it to feed those bugs. Otherwise, they're just gonna, die. Along the acid alkaline balance, remember the stomach is a pH of 1 or 2.
Right.
That is our first line of defense against some of these invaders, right? When the
Right.
stomach is weak, then we eat something, sushi or something that has parasites. They get past the stomach, and then we've got parasitic problems. That's going to be another truth or
Right.
trend to talk about, antiparasitics and what
Yeah.
feeds
Yeah.
them. But it starts with having good, healthy stomach. And so people think about, well, if I take betaine hydrochloride, isn't that going to make me acidic, right? So having a good stomach pH is going to systemically alkalize the system, because we're going to digest foods properly, and that's going to work well. We should probably take a small rabbit trail and talk about, when to take the supplements.
Sure.
People aren't quite astute enough to ask that on Google yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
So stomach acid as it is at its highest in the morning. So that's really when we should be eating that high, heavy protein meal. As you said, breaking the fast, break fast is breaking the fast. We should be breaking that with a high protein meal.
Mm,
Stomach acid is at its highest between 7 and 9 a.m. And 5 to 7 is when the colon's, doing most of its function in the acupuncture 24-hour clock. So that's why if a person's going to have one movement a day, it's going to be in the morning,
yeah. Yeah. And
because
it's
that's
and it's a good
time.
thing. Right.
Right,
Yeah.
and that is a beautiful thing.
Yes, exactly.
And that is another way to keep an eye on how your microbiome's working, is what does that look like first thing in the morning, right?
Mm, hmm.
Is it runny? Oops, too much yeast. I had too much sugar, dessert. And so then the person's gonna have, runny movements in the morning. Or
Right.
if it's sluggish and they can't get it out, maybe too many parasites, the
Right.
gut
Right.
biome is out of balance, and that movement is going to give you some indication of what's going on there.
Lots of indication. And as Jeannie Weenie, Dr. Jean Lawrence would say, you want 2 brown bananas, right? That's your goal.
There you go. Perfectly shaped, yeah.
We're going to go down
My
that rabbit hole.
and another SP presenter said that, when it's working right, you don't even need TPV. Don't even need toilet
That's
paper.
right. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's go there. What do they call it? A ghost wipe, right?
That's right.
Or a clean getaway.
Clean getaway. So
Right.
then on the timing, probiotics I find to best be needed at bedtime, right? Because
Mhm.
we want to get them in when stomach acid is at its at a lower point, is lower at night, away from other foods, in theory, and also that way they're getting into the digestive system about the time that the colon, in the 5 to 7 a.m. as the colon's going in its primary function. So typically, I would stack the probiotics at bedtime. I would stack more of the digestive aids in the morning or with the big primary meals, to optimize our use of our supplements, our investment in in nutrition ultimately.
Definitely, definitely. Okay. So another question we should be answering for everybody who's watching out there is how does the gut microbiome affect overall health? Right. I think
Hmm.
we're getting there with it. I think
Yeah,
it's everything. Everything is affected
it
by
is
that
right.
for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
To drive that point home. And that's where I think we can tie it into because it is affecting everything in the body. That's why there's such a powerful correlation between people who can live to be super centenarians, right? When they have
Right.
healthy microbiome going.
Right. Well, I mean, it's getting to, now research is kind of getting into individual strains and their effect on brain. I mean, in the early days, we said, the gut was the second brain.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I think that the gut is basically the workhorse for the brain, right? It creates
Mm,
the nutrition. It creates the B vitamins to help with methylation to stabilize dopamine production. We talked about L-reuteri and its specific effect
mm,
for loving and bonding and right and all of
right,
that. Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on and on. I
right.
mean, GABA is the main inhibitory brain chemical.
Exactly.
The probiotics, Campylobacter strain lowers GABA, so then we lose inhibition, right? Or the good
Yes,
probiotics facilitate GABA production, which gives us inhibition, which means shut the brain off to go to sleep at night. It
right.
means filter so that we can make appropriate comments as husbands.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the brain filter,
Yeah.
or we think before we speak,
I
right?
forget this. They used to call them psychobiotics, probiotics, right? Or some people still
Hmm.
do. And this is the piece when I'm teaching my whole 12-hour seminar on mental health, I wish I put more attention on and reminding
Hmm.
you that everything you just said says, yeah, it has everything. Mental health has everything to do with your gut health, everything to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
In
Hmm.
fact, when I muscle test, you have a muscle testing point for low GABA, right? Which is
Yep.
right
Yes.
here.
Yep. Yes.
That my first instinct after finding low GABA is to check the colon, right? Is to check the
Yep.
microbiome and see what's going
Hmm.
on in the
Hmm. Hmm.
probiotics. And that usually is the thing that strengthens that point, is addressing
Exactly.
the colon.
Right.
Yeah.
And parasites are very common trigger for low GABA as well. And so
Oh,
right, again, if that filter is broken, there's anxiety, right? Or
right.
seizures. See,
Yeah.
grand mal seizures are low GABA ultimately.
And just for those of you who don't know what GABA is, GABA is a neurotransmitter. It helps us relax, right? It helps us to be a little cooler, calmer, go to sleep at night, those types of things.
Yes, exactly. It stands for gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA, for what that's worth. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
it is the main inhibitory brain chemical, right? So we've got neurotransmitters, brain chemicals that excite us, get us up and going, get us fired up. Then we've got excited. Then the other side of that, we need to convert that glutamate, like MSG, monosodium glutamate, is excitatory. That's what part of why it makes food taste exciting,
Right. Yeah.
right? So that glutamate needs to convert to GABA to shut it off and go to sleep at night. So again, this whole fine dance that gut biota, affects us in a profound way. So yeah, I mean, how empty would psych hospitals be if we could get the gut biota correct in everybody, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay. So let's go, let's hit on Akkermansia then specifically, right? To answer the question for
Yeah.
those who are watching this for that, why
Hmm.
is it so important? And
Hmm.
should they take an Akkermansia supplement? Right? Those are
Right.
the questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, the Akkermansia is shown to help enhance butyrate, the
Mhm.
protective lining of the gut, and so
Yep.
that helps prevent all that arthritis and those types of triggers.
Yes.
So yes, I mean, truth is, probably should be considered in your protocol. The reality is, eating the good bacteria, creating or eat good foods, uh, again, there's the dance. The other probiotics need to go along with it to have the healthy community. So, taking Akkermansia by itself, potentially not, going to answer everything unless that is the strain.
Hmm.
Probiotics, like everything else, for some people, some probiotics are going to be a little different than probiotics for somebody else. You know,
Right.
one person might need L. reuteri, the other person might need lactobacillus. Another person might need L. reuteri. Depends on
Right.
how off their diet is, what they're eating, and if their diet makes a big shift. If they go into
Mhm.
carnivore diet for a while, their need for probiotics is going to change. You
Right.
know, if they go vegetarian and they're all plant-based, then the strains that they might need is going to be different.
Right. And as you're talking, it's made me caution people who are going carnivore to be hyper aware of the quality of the meat. Because if you're going carnivore and the goal is to
Mhm.
starve off all the yeast and the bad pathogens, but the meat you're eating has antibiotics in it, you're going to kill
Right.
off the good guys too, right? So you have to make sure that it's antibiotic free meats that you're eating,
Mhm.
and that there's no pesticides or herbicides. So you truly have to go where, if you're really going to do carnivore and get the benefit that you're doing there, that meat has to be without any of that mishigas in it, right?
Right, right,
So,
right, right.
okay.
Any
Very
of that wood in it? What did you just say?
mishigas. It's a Yiddish term that I throw around, like mishugana, right? Mishigas. It's a mess. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of my favorite words. Uh, so, and recently, I've been kind of speculating and thinking, well, as I'm rebuilding the microbiome, because we're going to do that all the time, right? People
Mhm.
inevitably have been put on an antibiotic round, or they're living out in the world and they're constantly being exposed to these things. And I most often think of it when somebody has taken antibiotics, right? And we have to get them back
Mhm.
to square one because it
Mhm.
happens. I'm starting to think that yes, you want to create the environment down there, but I do think it's important to start inoculating with L. reuteri again. Number one, because it's
Yeah.
so sensitive to all of those and it's wiped out
Mhm.
entirely, so we know it's gone. And I
Good point.
think if we're gonna give everything below that a chance to be the best version of itself, to really set up the best colonies, we should set the guards at the door first, right? Because
Mhm.
they create bactericidal chemicals to kill off bad bacteria. So to me, it's kind of like, well, if we throw the Akkermansia in first, but we don't put the guards at the door, all kinds
Mm.
of problems are going to come in and be making it 10 times harder for the Akkermansia to get to where they're supposed to be. But if we
Right.
set up the L. reuteri first and we have that protection, and then we bring in the Akkermansia, maybe that's the reason that doctor was having a hard time establishing the Akkermansia cultures, is because they didn't establish the L. reuteri first. Just something,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking that'd be the perfect concoction post antibiotic. If, unfortunately, a person's been, taking antibiotics. Everybody's talking a probiotic, but these are two, you talked about the reuteri and the Akkermansia really are
Yeah,
key strains along with butyrate.
right.
That's
Right. And
kind
there's
of
there's a lot of strains that we need to bring back into the comic, but I think these are two of the biggest ones that we should be focusing
right,
on for sure.
right, right.
Definitely. With
Truth.
lots of them. Yeah, truth. And from now on, and as I was reminded this weekend, when I start giving somebody Akkermansia, I'm going to encourage them very strongly to go get some pomegranate, because that's what's going to
Mm,
best feed that Akkermansia as well.
mhm, mhm.
Give it the best
Yeah.
opportunity to be able to start.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So yes,
Cool.
take your probiotic, take it at bedtime. Cough is another one. We didn't quite allude to that, but that's often, there's many potential triggers of a cough, but a chronic cough is often a sign of an improper gut bacteria, gut biome.
Right.
And this is a whole nother truth or trend thing, but vinegar I find to actually adversely affect the gut biome, contrary to, Dr. Google.
Go into that a little bit more for people who are watching, because I'm sure that's going to hook a few people's brains and go, huh?
That's
Yeah.
right. And the way I've came up with it from a blood type perspective, vinegar is a void for most of the blood types. Um, I was eating, I put the kids to bed, years ago. I put the kids to bed and I'd do my bookwork or my, finish up the work day, after they went to bed while I was eating salad. And I found myself coughing every night. And it's
Hmm.
like, why am I coughing? I'm eating salad. It's organic vegetables. This is crazy. But literally every salad dressing has vinegar in it. And
Hmm.
so it turned out to be a sensitivity to the vinegar that was actually almost feeding yeast for me when I'd eat the salad dressing with vinegar in it. So I had to, make my own salad dressing without, with olive oil and lemon or, something that not vinegar oriented. And then I wouldn't cough at night. So, that was 20 years ago. Now I've tested out on patients often that our beloved vinegar, and I like it. I mean, it tastes
Sure.
good,
Yeah, yeah.
but it tends to, and it's supposed to be, the holy grail for gut health and so on. But I find it to adversely affect the gut biome,
Wow.
and
So pay
and
attention is what you're saying. Don't
yeah,
just blindly accept because so many people have said over the years that vinegar is great for it. It may not be
right,
the case for you, right? You may be
right,
some reasons for that exceptional. Wow.
right, right.
Yeah, the coughing thing you reminded me. I lived in a house that was right on a lake, and of course there was a
Mm,
lot of mold exposure, a lot of moisture, and
mhm.
there I started coughing in the middle of the night. I'd wake up coughing, and I knew it was because what I was breathing, and so I'd have to take measures always to suppress that fungus, right? And it's like
Right.
that flora complex and oil of oregano and all that stuff. And if
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
didn't, I'd wake myself up coughing every night, of course, until I could, get rid of all the mold in the house. Yeah.
Right. And the lung meridian is 3 to 5 a.m. So it's probably
Mm,
3 to 5 a.m. that you were waking up coughing because lung was
interesting.
struggling.
Yeah, yeah, very
Mhm.
likely. Ah, that's why I've been waking up. Okay, got it.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Because people always ask that. Why am I waking up at 3? What's going on? Well, if your
Mhm.
lungs are weak, right? You
Yeah,
could have breathed in some chemicals that day. You could have been exposed to all kinds. And let's not forget that grief is in the lungs. So if you've had
100%.
something
Yep.
happen and you're grieving and you wake up,
Hmm.
that makes sense, right? So
Right.
yeah, you got
Right.
to
Right.
strengthen
Right.
those
Right.
lungs.
And GABA is the main neurotransmitter for the lungs. So
GABA is the main
lungs,
neurotransmitter for the
high
lung.
GABA. Right. Right.
Ah, okay.
So it's the opposite. Low GABA is colon issue, high GABA is lung issue. So it's
Ah,
again goes back to oxygen carrying. Mhm.
gotcha. So if they have high GABA, then you have to strengthen the lungs, is what you're saying.
Yes. Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Sweet. And how would you do that? What are your lung strengthening go-to?
Antioxidants, ultimately
Anti-
vitamin A, vitamin C, good, whole food type sources of vitamin A, vitamin C, the antioxidants, resveratrol,
Okay.
which wine, drink your wine.
Yeah.
Takes a lot
Uh-huh.
of wine to get enough resveratrol.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, those are beauties.
Right. What about like pneumotrophin? Do you find you have to do the tissue specific support
Mhm.
for that?
When it was a virus that starts as a leaky gut, when there was a virus, COVID when COVID still is a bit of a thing, but I mean, that is my antidote. When there's an autoimmune attack against the lungs, then it's going to be pneumotrophin. Anywhere
Wow.
else, if it's against the gut, it's going to be dermatrophin.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Yes. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, I think we've been talking about this for longer than we usually do because this is a long,
Fun
long
subject.
conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah. So thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, you want clarification, please leave a comment. If you want us to do more videos on this topic, because we could, and we probably will, any other strains or probiotics that you want us to kind of examine and tell you about whether or not we would, encourage them to use, just let us know. And any final parting thoughts, Dr. V, that you want to share with anybody who's out there still hanging in there with us till the very end for that last beautiful,
That's
most
right.
valuable pearl of wisdom?
Well, thank you for staying till the end. Yeah. So if you're going to take your stomach supplements, take them with meals. Start especially in the morning. Break fast. It should be a high protein meal. Get it started there. Taking your probiotics. If this did kind of ring your bell and has you thinking Akkermansia might be right for me, take it at bedtime. That's where you're going to get better value out of it, or any strain, whether it's Reuteri that we've already talked about or some of the other strains. Take those at bedtime tends to be beneficial to front load. I haven't talked about that yet, but typically I would front load, take a lot more, double or triple the normal dose for the first week or two to front load, build the dose, and then taper and take a more of a maintenance dosage again at bedtime, especially if there's chronic cough or chronic low back pain,
Hmm.
arthritis, these types of things that we're trying to correct. You might want to front load it, get the strains built up, and then support them long term.
That's interesting you say that because I've actually given an opposite direction for people for a specific reason. That if there's too much coming in, which is what you want to get it done,
Mm-hmm.
they may have
Mm-hmm.
a die off, right? So to set
Mm-hmm.
their expectations, if they are front loading, there may be
Mm-hmm.
some changes in the way things move down there, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
may
yeah.
make you go, whoa, that was a, but that's actually what you wanted to happen, but maybe you didn't
Hmm.
want it to happen that aggressively, right? So
Right. So maybe a binder would be in store, with
right,
it. Hmm.
right. Great
Hmm.
idea. Great idea. Awesome. Gosh, I can't even tell you what we're going to talk about next week, but thank you all. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to say.
Yeah.
What this applies to very specifically, if we're talking about longevity, is a callback to our Truth or Trend with Dr. Derek Strong, talking about the MVX, the Metabolic Variability Index. A lot of those things that were predictive of people dying in the next years is microbiome related, right? Pathogens being present. So this is very important, not just for longevity to address and look at, but also in the short term to really see what's going on. If you've done that metabolic variability index testing, it's probably also going to remind you, yeah, you need to get rid of any bugs that are in the gut that shouldn't be there, right?
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Truth is, probiotics are good
There it
most of
is.
the time.
All right, until next time, thank you all for watching.